Have you heard the term past lives before and wondered how that all works? Past lifetimes can have such a profound impact on us in this lifetime, even if people aren't aware that they exist. Today, we're going to peek behind the curtain of the illusion and discuss how past lives work, how they're actually not really past at all, and how we can resolve issues from past lives that create stumbling blocks for us in our current lifetime. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part of this episode. The group frequency calibration that accompanies this episode is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So be sure to listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. I'm Karen Cheong, and I'm here with my co-host, Tia. Let's get started.
So a lot of us have heard of the concept of past lives. I wonder, are they actually real? How do they affect us? Are they important?
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. So I'm going to answer all that stuff, and I'm going to talk about how they work, because I think that's going to be important for people to understand all those other things you just asked.
Yeah.
So past lives are things that fascinate people because it's like you'll notice that, for example, some people have a fear that they can't explain. So for example, right, like some people who have like a terrible fear of drowning and they've never had an experience of being underwater and not being able to breathe, but they actually don't even swim because they're so afraid of drowning, for example, and there's no reason for them to have that fear, right? Or different things like this where it's not just fears, but like it's often fears because people will notice that, more than something else. But past lives can also affect like who comes into your life. And if you have the sense of recognition of somebody, you meet them and you're like, I know this person. I've never met them before in my life, but I know that I know this person.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a past life thing. Okay. So I think to answer your questions, I'm just going to explain how past lives work from my perspective, okay, and from what I understand now. And the thing is, as I rise in my own frequency resonance, what becomes revealed to me changes. So this may change, but this is my understanding as it is currently. So a more accurate term for past lives is alternate life, okay, or alternate lifetimes, okay? All right. Why do I call it alternate life instead of past life? Because you have to understand time, and time from different perspectives. So you and I have talked a lot about time. In fact, we did a whole episode just on the 0 point of time. There is an episode called What is Time? I think it's episode 80. And there is another episode that you and I did on the new frequency resonance of time. So there's a lot of stuff around time. So in order to understand past lives, you have to understand linear time and the eternal now. Okay? So everything on spirit level happens in the eternal now. Okay, everything is happening in the present moment. Because we are human and we have brains and we're not able to process, just think of that. Everything is happening in the eternal now. Like you can't, it's like mind blowing. You can't even possibly conceive of that because there's so much. So your brain cannot process it. It doesn't have the computation ability to deal with it. So it's much slower than, for example, it's more finite than consciousness, which is infinite and can process at a greater level. So because we have minds and because we have brains, we take time and flatten it to what we call linear time, where we have the experience of, or really it's an illusion of past, present, future. Okay, we compress it just like we would compress music into an MP3. We flatten that information into something that is less information and easier to deliver, to send to somebody else, by your phone or whatever. Okay, so it's similar with time. Okay, so you have the eternal now, which is happening like on spirit level, everything is happening in the eternal now. Okay, that's actually what is. The linear time is just for our brains to understand and make sense of time. Okay, so I'm telling you this so that people understand the overlap. Okay, so this is going to be a little out there in left field. Okay, if you can go with me for a little bit. If you don't understand all this, it's okay. Just be in the resonance of what I'm saying. Okay, all right. Everything happens in the eternal now. The thing that distinguishes lifetime from lifetime is not that it happened in the past. That's the way our brains think. They're actually happening at different space-time resonances. They're different in their resonance of space-time. So they're actually all happening in the eternal now.
All at once, but in different resonances.
Exactly.
Okay.
all at once, different resonances. The resonances are like little file systems, right? It's like little systems, and you have these different experiences. Now, if you imagine them as little pockets, right? Different space-time resonance having these little these experiences, and you as a bigger consciousness having like all of these happen at the same time. Why do you have a past life experience in this lifetime? Okay, what you call a past life experience, or like a bleed through of that fear or that knowing of that
A
person.
bleed through, I like that. Yeah.
Okay. Because what's happened in that particular space-time resonance experience, it's happening now, okay, in the eternal now, is so traumatic or so felt or so intense, or the relationship was so strong, it pushes out of that space-time resonance and affects the other ones. It just, right, the resonance is so strong, it bleeds out. It doesn't stay contained in that space-time resonance, and it starts to affect the other ones. Okay? So you're aware of it, not completely, because you have a mind that thinks
it's just an essence of.
it's like an essence of, like a faint memory, or like this weird aversion to, or a like for something, or a predisposition towards something that you can't explain. Like no one else in your family is obsessed with pottery. You, however, want to like make all kinds of clay things.
Yeah.
Right? No reason for it. Zero.
Yeah.
But this often will be a past life. So in another, possibly more than one, alternate lifetime, your love for the art of pottery is very strong, and you've done it many, many times in many of these different little pockets. So it bleeds up and out through that space-time resonance and affects the others. Make sense?
Yeah, so a very strong affinity to something that seems like kind of out of the blue of maybe your lineage or something, or a strong fear, or a strong aversion. Those could all be past
lives, or even affinity for certain cultures. So for example, right, you can have something where you have an affinity for a certain culture, even though you physically don't look anything like it. So
I have that.
Yeah. Which, with what?
African culture.
African culture, yeah.
The drumming, the dancing, the people.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. No one in my family does.
Yep.
Must have been.
Past lifetime.
Yeah.
For Chris, my husband's white, right? And he has a strong affinity for Japanese culture. Very, very strong. And there's this form of music called, I think it's called gagaku. I think I don't know if that's the correct word, but it's the music that used to be played when the emperor would appear, and he literally will weep when he hears it.
He's affected by it.
He's affected by it. It's almost like he's waiting on like tenterhooks for the emperor to walk in. It's like a very revered moment.
Wow.
You know, so he has this memory of this. He's like a white dude from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
You know, like where'd that come from? You know, or for example, for me, I will have past lifetimes as Native peoples. So I'll have an affinity for that. Or even though I'm totally, obviously not white, I have past life memories of being Scottish, like in the Highlands. So I have a memory of that. See, it doesn't matter what your skin color is in this and what your experience culturally is in this lifetime. So in those pockets of life, space-time resonances, and there are often many of them, okay, where you have these affinities for different cultures, you recognize them because it's like, that's so familiar to me.
And comfortable.
And comfortable.
Yeah.
And even like, for example, the landscape of that space may be something that it like opens your heart, for example, right? So like, for example, if we're watching a movie and it happens to be, or even not even a movie, but just like video footage of you know, places like the Isle of Skye or something like this, you know, a Scottish outlying island, it will make me feel like emotional.
Wow.
Okay. And yes, I have been there once in my lifetime, but typically when you know, it's not because of that.
Yeah.
It's not because I happened to go see it that I have this emotional response to it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's something greater.
Wow.
So when we have these alternate lifetime experiences, especially like I said, if they're repeated, meaning in many space-time resonances where you happen to repeat in that same culture, or something traumatic happened, or for example, if a wrong was done. So for example, I've worked on clients where they've had alternate lifetime experiences where in that lifetime, they are betrayed by somebody that they love. So it's hard for them to trust people in this lifetime.
I was just going to ask, does that influence our distortion patterns?
Yes, because it's happening in the eternal now. I know it's kind of trippy.
Yeah.
It's happening in the eternal now. So when the bleed through is enough, when the distortion is strong enough, or the affinity is strong enough, you're one, right? So you're going to, on some level, even if it's not consciously, register that and recreate it in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason frequency work is so great, so there's all kinds of past life regressions and stuff like this. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And I've heard that they do great things, and that's wonderful. So the thing about frequency work that's fantastic is that it happens in the eternal now. That's where frequency work happens, because it's at the level of spirit. It has to happen at that level in order for it to be frequency work at all.
It doesn't happen here.
It doesn't happen in the physical.
In the dense
yeah, it happens in spirit, at spirit level, in the eternal now. Okay, beyond space and time, meaning linear time and space. It happens at that higher level. So that's why, for me, I can delete the distortion in the alternate lifetime. So what happens? Not only does it resolve in this lifetime, it resolves in those lifetimes, because you're working at the source of it, which is in the eternal now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Everything is happening in the eternal now. So if you're working at that level and releasing the distortion pattern, it's like the distortion pattern that governs all of the lifetimes.
Right.
So it changes.
Do you think that's ever a negative thing, like you're affecting realities in a way that,
that's a good question.
I wonder about, because you see I'm thinking about movies that
like the butterfly effect or
yes,
whatever.
Where they go back in time and then, now they just,
with
they've
their
changed free
something.
will, they change and now
But
you're doing it for the better, so I don't know.
Well, what I would say about that is I am not vested in an outcome. So in those movies, they're trying to change something because they're trying to change what happens today in the same way.
They don't want their mom to
die or whatever.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not that specific. So I'm never really trying to make something in the physical happen.
Yeah.
I'm releasing a distortion that's being presented to me by the person's higher self to resolve in this moment as priority. So it means that at that point, they're getting stuck, right? Whether it's in this lifetime and or others. And it's time for it to be released so that that being's resonance can rise as a whole. Make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not a 3D outcome of must resolve this to get that.
Yeah.
It's more like resonance needs to rise. We need to release this distortion that's happening either in this lifetime and in others so that the resonance of the whole can rise.
Yeah, that's very different.
How that shows up in the physical, I have no idea.
And it doesn't matter.
And it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I know that sounds horrible to some people, but it's true because it's really about the resonance rising.
Right.
So it's not like it's not driven in the same way that those movies would portray. I can see that.
Yeah. And really, when you help someone's resonance to rise, it affects everyone else for the better. So that really just sounds like a great thing that you're doing. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so the resonance level will rise in like I said, not only in this lifetime, but the other lifetimes. So things start to resolve. And again, it's not like I'm in there with saying this person now needs to resolve this relationship with their mother, and in this life it has to be like that. It's not that. It's just like all of a sudden this clears, and what happens as a result of that, it's not for me. It's like that is what the higher self is dictating. So I'm following.
Wow, that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
So someone can have an individual session with you and work on past lives, and are you able to see specifics of past lives or general? How does that work?
Generally. So what typically happens with past lives is how I work with them is it's not requested. So someone doesn't come to me saying, I have this past life issue, it's this, please deal. It's more like we're in the session and I'm like, I've hit a distortion. So remember, sorry, I'm going backing up. Okay. Okay. So the way that frequency work works, I am not doing something to you. Okay, I am in response to your higher self. That's how it works. Okay, and to pure source. That's what's happening. So I'm always following priority on spirit level. Just because you physically request something, we're just going to use the UTF for example.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone's on the phone and they're requesting something from me.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to fulfill what it is that your mind asks for. I will do my best.
Sure.
But sometimes that's not the priority. Does that make sense?
You talk with the higher self.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, we may get to that. And it's actually this.
Gotcha.
And it's not because I'm trying to be mean, but it's simply that the way I function is in the service to raising your frequency resonance, not necessarily getting you what you want, what you think you want. Okay? So a lot of people what you think you want. Because a lot of people will think they want something, but when they rise up in frequency resonance, it's not as relevant anymore because their resonance has now risen and what was important to them no longer is. Make sense? Because they had a certain distortion pattern. So it changes everything. So what will happen is if we're working on something and it's something like they're having an issue, for example, with their partner, okay, and it's sticky, and we'll start working on the different distortion patterns, and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh my God, this is a past life distortion. Right? So I don't say alternate lifetime because nobody knows what that is, but I'll say this is a past life distortion. It is happening in 5 lifetimes. It's this, this, and this. This is what happened in 3 of them. This is what happened in 2. This is how your relationship was. And I'm saying it very fast because I'm aware of what they are, but it's like I don't dwell in a lot of them, right? I'm like, this is what happened. This is la, and so that is why you have this now. We're going to resolve it for all of them.
Right, let's move on.
Let's move on, right? So it's not about the story. The story isn't important. It's about releasing the distortion.
Yes.
Right? The story is simply our human, like a response to the distortion pattern, how we, do you know what I mean? In whatever way it showed up. But it's not, because some people can get really caught in the story. I'm like, don't get caught in the story.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of the distortion so that you don't have it in this lifetime and you can resolve it in the other ones, and whatever happens, happens. Right? And it will just, everything will move up to the higher order. So that's how things, so it may be that people will say, I've noticed that I have this relationship with this person. Is that a past life thing? That has happened.
And you can do that.
And I can do that. And I'll be like,
cool.
Yeah, it is, or no, it's not. Actually, it's actually this. Okay, so that can help. But the best way is when it becomes organically, and I don't control it, again, right? Because it's not like I'm seeking this for you.
No.
It's just that I'm in response to whatever is being shown as priority at that moment.
Cool. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Another little side note, I know people work with past lives, like you said, with other types of modalities. And I notice a lot of healers, if you want to call them that, out there, whether they're legit or not. It seems like everyone brings up past lives of like, oh, you were Caesar in the dead. I'm just like, how can every past life be some monument? Aren't there just normal lives where it's just like not anything big? Yeah. Okay.
I've actually, most of the past lives that we work with aren't anything
They're
like
just
you or
ordinary
anybody.
lives.
They're just ordinary lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing too is the challenge, and I'm not saying about this about all past life regression, because I certainly don't know every single past life regression tool or process or any modality. Okay, so I'm not suggesting it's everyone. But a lot of the limitation about that, about past life regression, is that you're trying to use this lifetime as this space-time resonance stamp to delete something that happened in a different space-time resonance stamp. And if you're not high enough in resonance to resolve it in both, it'll come back. Does that make sense? Because you're still having bleed through from this lifetime, the one in that other space-time resonance. It's not resolved. Does it make sense to you?
Yes.
You're trying to use this lifetime to try and resolve this one, but you have to work above both of them, meaning in the eternal now, to be able to resolve them. Makes sense? You can't use this space-time resonance to resolve this one. You can to some degree, but it doesn't complete it necessarily. It can reduce it, but it doesn't necessarily completely release it.
And release
Okay?
it. Okay.
And like I said, I don't know every past life regression modality, so I'm not suggesting that it's not possible. I'm just saying from what I can tell right now, that's part of the challenge with it.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm remembering a friend of mine in the past who she couldn't explain it, but she couldn't have anything touching her neck. And I'm like, oh, probably
past life.
Yeah. That sounds like it. Like
totally.
it's a very strong.
Yes.
She's never had anything notable in her in that present life. So it's like, oh, it's kind of fascinating.
It's totally fascinating. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting to us because it starts to have us realize that we're more than this lifetime. That's the thing, you know? More than what we can see influences us. And when you die, okay, the longer you are dead, the more you start to, especially if you start to rise in your frequency resonance, and we'll talk about, I think we've talked about death a number of times, but anyway, what happens is you start to be aware of your other lifetimes. Why? Because as you rise in your frequency resonance, as you die, assuming you do that, okay, and you get stuck in the human realm, you actually move, you start to become aware of what? Eternal now. And when you become aware of the eternal now you have access to all the lifetimes. And you start to know them and associate, and you're like, oh my God, all those lifetimes. Oh, that time when, now I know why Jim's here. Hi, Jim. You know, whatever it is. But my point is that those boxes, those little space-time resonance, right? I call them little file folders or whatever in different space-time resonances. You can open all of them. They all become visible to you because they're not, you know what I mean? Those space-time resonances are in linear time. They're not in the eternal now. The eternal now, all of it's happening, so you have awareness of it. So you get to start to experience that in a different way, because it's not, we don't have that association with just this physical, finite lifetime, this is what our reality is.
Right.
Makes sense as a little box.
Right.
We start to know from a greater level what's actually happening.
So good point, though. Even you don't even have to die to realize.
No.
Yeah.
No, you don't have to die.
That's what this episode can really help with too. Like, I know a lot of people feel stuck, or like we had said before, like life happens to them, or trapped, or whatever the emotion. And it's like, actually, there's a lot of greater things happening.
Oh,
and
totally.
that can free you even just thinking about that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it all comes down to how high your frequency resonance is. So you and I have talked about before the 0 point and being able to bridge between the present moment and linear time in the eternal now. Why do you care about the eternal now? Because you get to access information like this. I mean, if it's interesting to you.
Yeah.
It's just and it's not that, look, all those things that you're learning in those lifetimes are there for you to grow and learn from. Okay? So it's not like you have to get bogged down in the story of it. Again, that's a very human thing.
Yeah.
It's to be able to have the awareness. Really, the important thing is that it's not just about this life, this one physical life that you're experiencing right now, that there's these other things happening. And the spectacularness of it is that you're learning from all of them. And if you start to think about it and you're like, wow, that happens on many levels, like how much you're learning and how much you are other than just your mind, body, and like what you think of as real, it kind of gets a little trippy. You're like, whoa, that's a lot going on. I'm like, yes, exactly. That's what infinite indestructible consciousness is. It is this infiniteness, this limitlessness that it's hard for us to conceive of with our linear minds.
Yep.
Difficult. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Just kind of like, cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Thank you. I feel like that's a lot of
Information.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And for those of you who want to listen to the GFC to start to help you get to the point where you can start to access the eternal now by releasing some of your distortion patterns that keep you from getting there, please listen to the GFC at the end, or the group frequency calibration at the end, because that will start to help you do that. And for those of you who have memory of past lives or whatever, comment below and share with us what your past life experience is. All right, bye for now. We're about to start the group frequency calibration, or GFC, where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. To get to the GFC, click on the square that'll appear to the right or the link in the description below. It's time to bring in a new experience, a new consciousness, and a new world. Let's rise together.